need direct access to data to make good business decisions. Corticon's Advanced Data Connector, or ADC, with custom queries can help. Using ADC, you can efficiently read and write data from a variety of databases to enhance your business rules. Our business case is simple. We want to connect to a SQL Server database to retrieve patient records using a custom query and run rules to determine the eligibility for patients to receive specific treatments. This sample is included with Corticon Studio. At the end of this video, we will give you details about how you can run it yourself. Let's start by looking at a sample database. We pre-configured a SQL Server database with the necessary application tables for patient and treatment data using a script that is available with the standard Corticon sample. In your application, these tables would be pulled from an existing database. And of course, there must be a few rows of sample data for the rules to process. In SQL Server, you can preview those rows like this. For this demonstration, we also preloaded the tables ADC uses to store queries. You need to work with your database administrator to add these standard ADC tables and custom queries. The queries are specific to your database. To load the tables and queries, we use another script. It defines the ADC tables, fields, and keys. The script also creates the sample queries for the patient and treatment tables. To use ADC with your database, you replace the queries for patients and treatments with queries for your database. For this demo, we need those sample queries. When the rows in the table are selected, you can see the queries that are used by our rules. Notice that you can pass values to customize the queries at runtime. With the database ready to access, we use Corticon Studio to add an ADC data source to the sample project. With the vocabulary selected, you can add a data source like this. Rather than watching a lot of typing, let's show you the finished patient data source. Corticon supports connecting to a variety of databases and versions. We chose SQL Server 2019 and we tailored the machine name, port, and appropriate login credentials. Now let's test the connection. That looks good. We already have our vocabulary loaded with the metadata. In your application, you import the metadata like this, choosing only the tables of interest. The metadata for all of the fields are added so that you can add additional attributes as needed. You probably noticed that the vocabulary looks different now. The data source patient data appears at the top. The patient entity icon is different, and when you hover over the entity, the data source information is shown. Also, expanding the data source properties shows the entity identity or primary key for the table. We essentially mapped the vocabulary entities and attributes to the tables and columns in the database. So now, when you look at the rule sheet, the conditions use a vocabulary that maps to the database table and field, and the corresponding action writes to an attribute that maps to the database table and field. The rules aren't using the connector directly. They are expecting input values and creating output values like any other rule sheet. It is in the rule flow where the connector is represented by two service callouts, one to read data with get patient data, and another to write data with save approvals. In order to add service callouts, this project is also preloaded with the Corticon extensions for ADC. You add them in the project properties like this. Again, for the sample, this is pre-configured. These extensions enable the database connections to use SQL queries to read and update the data to which the rules map. So remember to add the Corticon extensions jar file to new projects that require ADC. Let's review the Get Patient Data properties for reading the data. In the Properties view, the service callout is selected on the left. The service name is Corticon ADC.read. This service callout allows us to run the queries our database administrator helped us create earlier. In the Runtime properties, you can see the data source name and the query name for one of the stored queries. You could choose all or a specific patient row to read from the database. We chose a specific subset of patients. The actual rule sheet is in the middle. And the second service callout, Save Approvals, allows you to write changes to the database. You can see that this call is a write, and the service callout uses the Update Treatment query to write the changes to the database. Let's test the workflow with this rule test. There are multiple test sheets. Because we had the indicated patient query reading rows, let's use a test sheet that limits the patients selected. When you run the test sheet, it reviews patient number 1, and after running the rule, it assigns the treatment.approved to true or false, based on the medical code value that was read from the database. At this point, you would deploy this rule flow as a package with everything in the rule flow, the service callouts, and the connections as a single decision service file. You can push the rules to deployment right away or stage the package for management using Web Console. If you want to try this for yourself, then you can import the sample used in this video from Corticon Studio. For detailed steps about how to set up the database and use the sample, see the Corticon Information Hub and search for Getting Started with ADC. This concludes our look at how to access data with ADC. To learn more about Corticon, visit the Corticon Information Hub at docs.progress.com, Corticon.